Mira had always known that life could change in a moment, but she never imagined it would happen on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Timmy, her 11-year-old brother, had been complaining of stomach pain for days. Mira thought it was stress from school, or maybe something he ate. But when she found him on the floor of their small apartment, pale, sweating, his breathing shallow and rapid, she knew this was something else. Something far worse. The emergency room doctor's diagnosis came after 2 hours of tests. Acute appendicitis with signs of perforation. Timmy needed surgery within 12 hours, or the infection could become septic. We can stabilize him here, the doctor said, but the surgery he needs, we don't have a pediatric surgeon available until Thursday. That's 2 days. He doesn't have 2 days. Mira's throat tightened. Where can I take him? The doctor hesitated. Alistair Memorial has a pediatric surgical team on call 24/7. But... He glanced at her worn clothing, her calloused hands. Their fees are substantial, and they require a deposit before surgery. Alistair Memorial. The name alone made Mira's stomach drop. The hospital owned by the Alistair family, specifically by Kade Alistair, the billionaire heir whose face appeared in tabloids more often than business journals. Scandals, broken engagements, a lawsuit over mismanaged charity funds. The man was a walking PR disaster. But Mira didn't care about his reputation. She cared about Timmy's life. Within an hour, Timmy was transferred by ambulance. The building rose before her, all glass and white stone, intimidatingly pristine. Inside everything gleamed, marble floors, leather seating, abstract art that probably cost more than her yearly income. At the financial services desk, a sympathetic woman named Grace reviewed Timmy's case. The surgery will cost $45,000, she said gently. We require $15,000 upfront. Mira's savings account held $2,800. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a pharmacy, evenings tutoring students, and she'd been saving for her own university fees. I can pay $2,800 now, Mira said, hands trembling. And I can set up a payment plan. Please. My brother will die. Grace's expression softened with genuine regret. I wish I could approve that, but our policy requires. Is there anyone who can override the policy? Mira interrupted, desperation making her bold. Someone with authority. Grace bit her lip, then leaned forward. There is someone. Mr. Alistair himself occasionally approves emergency compassionate care cases. She paused. He's hosting a foundation launch event here tonight. 3rd floor ballroom. Security will be intense, but if you could somehow reach him. It was a thin thread of hope, but Mira grasped it with both hands. She left Timmy in the pediatric ward, watching his pale face, his small hand curled on the white sheets, and whispered a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. I'll fix this. That evening, Mira returned wearing the only presentable dress she owned, a navy blue wrap dress she'd bought secondhand for job interviews. She'd borrowed lipstick from her roommate and swept her natural hair into a bun. The ballroom was transformed. Crystal chandeliers refracted light across walls draped in white and gold. Waiters circulated with champagne. Guests in designer clothing clustered in elegant groups, their laughter polished and performative. Mira slipped in by following a catering crew through a service entrance. Her heart hammered as she scanned the room. And then she saw him. Kade Alistair stood near the center of the room, taller than his photographs suggested. He wore a black suit that fit him like it had been engineered specifically for his frame. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that looked oddly detached, as if he were observing the party rather than participating in it. People surrounded him, but he seemed alone somehow. Mira forced herself forward. A security guard stepped into her path immediately. Invitation. I need to speak to Mr. Alistair. It's urgent. No direct access. If you have a business inquiry. My brother is dying, Mira said, her voice breaking through the careful politeness. He's upstairs in your pediatric ward right now. Please. I just need 2 minutes. The guard's expression didn't change. I can't. Let her through. The voice came from behind the guard. Kade had noticed the commotion. He approached, his gaze fixed on Mira with unsettling intensity. Up close, she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You have 1 minute, he said. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. Clinical. Efficient. Mira's words tumbled out. My brother Timmy is 11. He has acute appendicitis. Perforated. He needs surgery tonight or he'll develop sepsis. I have $2,800, but your hospital requires $15,000 upfront. I can work, I can set up payments, I can clean your offices, I can, her voice cracked. Please. He's all I have. Kade studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to his assistant, who'd appeared at his elbow. Pull the file for. He glanced at Mira. Timmy Okoye, she whispered. Timmy Okoye, pediatric emergency. Verify the case. He turned back to Mira. If everything you've said is accurate, I'll approve the surgery. Full cost coverage. Relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Thank you. Thank you. But, Kade continued, his tone sharpening, I want something in return. The relief froze into something colder. What? He glanced around the ballroom, at the reporters near the entrance, at the cameras, at the politicians schmoozing near the bar. When he looked back at her, something calculating had entered his expression. Not here. Come with me. He led her out of the ballroom, down a quiet corridor, into a private office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The desk was clear except for a laptop and a single glass of water. Kade closed the door. I'm launching a philanthropic foundation, he said without preamble. After some public missteps, my board of directors and our investors have made it clear that my leadership is contingent on rehabilitating my image. Mira didn't understand what this had to do with Timmy. I don't. I need a fiancé, Kade interrupted. Temporary. Public only. Someone respectable, relatable, and sympathetic. Someone who makes me look like I've matured. His gaze was steady, unflinching. You need money for your brother's surgery, and his follow-up care, which will be extensive. I need you to play a role. The room seemed to tilt. You want me to pretend to be engaged to you? For 6 months. You'll attend events with me, give interviews, appear in promotional materials for the foundation. In exchange, your brother receives full medical coverage. Surgery, recovery, medications, everything. Plus $8,000 per month for your personal expenses. Mira's mind raced. This was insane. This was... Why me? She managed. Because you're genuine, Kade said simply. You walked into a room full of elites in a second-hand dress and fought for your brother's life. That's the narrative we need. A real person. Not another society fixture. This is... Mira struggled for words. This is manipulation. Yes, Kade agreed without hesitation. It is. But it's also survival. Mine and your brother's. He moved to the desk, pulling out a folder. This is the contract. Read it. Take your time. But your brother's surgery needs to happen within the next 6 hours. The cruelty of the timeline wasn't lost on her. Mira took the contract with shaking hands. 10 pages. Legal language. Clauses about public appearances, media protocols, confidentiality agreements, termination conditions. At the bottom, 2 signature lines. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Timmy's face flashed in her mind. His gap-toothed smile. The way he always saved her the last piece of bread. His dream of becoming a pilot. She picked up the pen. I'll do it, she whispered. Just save him. Kade's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. Your brother's surgery will begin within the hour. 3 weeks later. The transformation had been methodical. Mira moved into a guest suite in Kade's penthouse, a place so vast and minimalist it felt more like a museum than a home. A stylist named Dora arrived the first morning with racks of clothing. A media coach named Mr. Nick drilled her on posture, speech patterns, and how to deflect intrusive questions. You're not lying, he told her during one session. You're curating truth. There's a difference. Mira wasn't sure she believed that. The engagement announcement went public on a Tuesday. Professional photos, Kade's hand resting on her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, both of them smiling like they'd found something precious. The media devoured it. Billionaire Kade Alistair engaged to healthcare worker Mira, a love story that began in a hospital. Has America's most notorious bachelor finally reformed? Overnight, Mira became public property. Strangers dissected her smile, her past, her clothing choices. Fan pages appeared. Gossip blogs speculated about pregnancy, secret romances, hidden motives. Through it all, Timmy recovered. The surgery had been successful. He was still in the hospital, regaining strength, but he was alive. Mira visited him every day, and every time she saw his improving color, his returning energy, she reminded herself why she'd made this choice. But living with Kade was complicated. He was distant most of the time, polite but detached, as if they were colleagues in a business arrangement rather than supposed lovers. He disappeared often, citing meetings or work emergencies. When he was home, he spent hours in his private study. And there were other things Mira noticed. Small, strange things. He never drank alcohol at events, always holding a glass of champagne but never sipping. He avoided strenuous activities. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, he'd press a hand to his chest and breathe slowly, deliberately. One evening, Mira found a pill organizer on the kitchen counter. 7 compartments, each filled with multiple medications. She shouldn't have looked. But curiosity, or maybe concern, made her pick it up. The labels were partially visible. Carvedilol, spironolactone, warfarin, heart medications. Her medical knowledge was limited, but she'd worked at a pharmacy long enough to recognize those names. Why would Kade be taking heart failure medications? Before she could investigate further, she heard footsteps. She quickly set the organizer down and stepped back. Kade entered the kitchen, his expression unreadable. He glanced at the counter, saw the pill organizer, then looked at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You should have told me you saw those," he said finally. "I didn't mean to pry." "But you did." His tone wasn't angry, just tired. "And now you're wondering." Mira hesitated. Then quietly, "Are you sick?" Kade exhaled slowly. He moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. "I have dilated cardiomyopathy," he said. "A genetic heart condition. My heart muscle is weakening. Eventually, it will fail completely." The words hit her like cold water. "How long have you known?" 3 years. "It's progressing faster than expected." He turned to face her. "I'm on the transplant waiting list. But transplants are prioritized based on medical need, organ compatibility, and social factors. The board needs to believe I'm stable, responsible, worth saving." Suddenly, everything made sense. The engagement. The foundation. The carefully orchestrated redemption arc. "You're not fixing your image for investors," Mira said slowly. "You're doing it to stay alive." Kade's smile was bitter. "Both, actually. But yes. Without public support, I drop on the priority list. And without a transplant." He didn't finish the sentence. Mira felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't just a business arrangement. This was desperation disguised as manipulation. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because I needed you to say yes. And I thought you might refuse if you knew I was using you to survive." He met her gaze directly. "Was I wrong?" She wanted to say yes. She wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw the same desperation she'd felt the night she begged him to save Timmy. "No," she admitted quietly. "You weren't wrong." 6 weeks later. The Foundation Gala was the largest event yet. Over 300 guests, live media coverage, speeches from politicians and philanthropists. Mira wore a gold gown that caught the light like liquid metal. Kade, in a tailored black tuxedo, looked every bit the reformed heir the media had decided he was. They moved through the crowd together, hands loosely intertwined. Mira had learned to smile on cue, to answer questions with practiced warmth, to play the role she'd been hired for. But tonight, something felt different. Kade was paler than usual. His hand trembled slightly against hers. Twice during his speech, he paused mid-sentence, catching his breath. "Are you okay?" Mira whispered during a break in the program. "I'm fine," he said automatically. But she knew he was lying. Halfway through the evening, during a photo opportunity, Kade's knees buckled. Mira caught him instinctively, her arm wrapping around his waist. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. "Kade," she said urgently. "Kade, look at me." His eyes were unfocused. His breathing rapid and shallow. Security rushed forward. Someone called for a doctor. The event descended into controlled chaos. Mira didn't let go of him. Not when the paramedics arrived. Not when they loaded him onto a stretcher. Not when the ambulance doors closed. In the hospital, his own hospital, the doctors worked quickly. Mira sat in the waiting area, her gold gown incongruous against the sterile white walls. A cardiologist named Dr. Adele Eek approached her after an hour. "He's in acute heart failure," she said. "We've stabilized him for now, but his condition is deteriorating rapidly. He needs a transplant soon. Weeks, not months." Mira's throat tightened. "Is he awake?" "Yes. He's asking for you." The hospital room was dim, machines beeping softly. Kade lay propped against pillows, and 4-line in his arm, oxygen cannula in his nose. He looked fragile. Human. "You stayed," he said when he saw her. "Of course I stayed." She moved to his bedside, pulling a chair close. "You could have left. The contract doesn't require you to." "Stop," Mira interrupted. "Just stop." She reached for his hand carefully, mindful of the 4. "You saved my brother's life," she said quietly. "You gave him a future. How could I walk away when you need help?" Kade's eyes glistened. "This isn't your responsibility." "Maybe not. But it matters to me anyway." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then Kade spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared." It was the first time she'd heard him admit it. "I know," Mira said. And she did. Because she'd felt that same terror the night Timmy collapsed. "I don't want to die," Kade continued. "I don't want this to be the end. I want—" He stopped, struggling for words. "I want more time." Mira squeezed his hand gently. "Then we'll fight for it. Together." 3 months later. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Mira was asleep in the penthouse guest room when her phone buzzed. Dr. Adele Eek. "Answer immediately." Her heart lurched. "Hello. Mira, we have a heart compatible match. Kade needs to come to the hospital now." She was out of bed before the call ended. Kade was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, hands shaking slightly as he pulled on a shirt. "They found one," he said. Not a question. He'd been waiting for this call for years. "They found one," Mira confirmed. The drive to the hospital was silent. Kade stared out the window. Mira kept glancing at him, watching the tension in his jaw, the fear he was trying to hide. At the hospital, the surgical team moved efficiently. Consent forms. Pre-op preparations. Final checks. Dr. Adele Eek explained the procedure. 8 to 12 hours of surgery, significant risks, months of recovery. "Do you have any questions?" she asked Kade. He shook his head. Then he looked at Mira. "Will you be here when I wake up?" "Yes," Mira said without hesitation. "I promise." They wheeled him toward the operating room. At the last moment, Kade reached out, catching Mira's hand. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Then the doors closed, and he was gone. Mira didn't leave the hospital. She sat in the surgical waiting area, watching the clock, counting minutes that felt like hours. Timmy, fully recovered now, joined her around hour 4, bringing tea and worried hugs. "He's going to be okay," Timmy said with the certainty only children possess. Mira wanted to believe him. At hour 9, Dr. Adele Eek emerged, still in surgical scrubs. Mira stood so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Adele Eek said, and Mira's knees nearly gave out with relief. "The new heart is functioning well. He'll be in ICU for several days, but the prognosis is good." Mira covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Can I see him? He's still under anesthesia, but yes. Briefly. The ICU room was filled with machines, tubes, monitors. Kade lay still and pale, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Mira moved to his bedside and carefully took his hand. You made it, she whispered. You're going to be okay. She stayed until the nurses gently ushered her out, promising to call if anything changed. 2 weeks later. Kade's recovery was slow but steady. By the second week, he was sitting up, breathing without assistance, even managing short walks around the ward. Mira visited every day. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. One afternoon Kade said, "The contract ends in 3 months." Mira had been reading aloud from a novel. She closed the book slowly. "I know. You'll be free," Kade continued. "From the pretending. From me." She studied his face, still pale, but stronger now. "Alive. What if I don't want to be free from you?" Kade's gaze snapped to hers. "What?" Mira set the book aside. These past months, they started as a transaction. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling fake. She hesitated. "At least for me. Mira." "You don't have to say anything," she interrupted quickly. "I know this wasn't supposed to be real. I know you were protecting yourself. But I need you to know that she took a breath. "I care about you. Not the billionaire. Not the heir. You. The person who panics about forgetting to take his evening medications. The person who donates anonymously to pediatric wards. The person who's terrified of storms but won't admit it." Kade stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. "I didn't think I was allowed to feel this," he said quietly. "I thought if I kept it transactional, it would be easier when you left." "And?" Mira asked. "It's not easier. It's torture." He reached for her hand with the care of someone who'd nearly lost everything. "Mira Okoye, will you stay with me? Not because of a contract. Not because of money. But because you want to." She smiled, tears blurring her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay." When he kissed her, gently, carefully, it felt nothing like pretending. It felt like coming home. 6 months later. The Foundation's 1-year anniversary gala was smaller, more intimate than the chaotic launch event. This time, there were no cameras. No reporters. Just people who genuinely cared about the work. Timmy, healthy and thriving, gave a speech about his recovery. Kade, still regaining his full strength but visibly healthier, talked about second chances. And Mira, wearing a simple green dress, stood beside him, not as a hired fiancé, but as his partner. Afterward, as they walked through the hospital gardens, Kade stopped near a bench. "I have something for you," he said. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Mira's breath caught. "This isn't like before," Kade said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "This isn't for show. This isn't a transaction." He looked at her with the kind of vulnerable honesty that took courage. "Mira, I love you. And I'm asking, really asking, will you marry me?" She didn't need to think. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Mira thought about fate, about choices, about the strange paths that lead us to the people we're meant to find. She'd walked into a hospital desperate to save her brother. She'd left with something she never expected. A future. A family. A love that was real. And that, she thought, was worth more than any contract could ever promise.
If you enjoyed this story, please like, share and subscribe for more. Thank you.